Meeting. A special warm welcome to you, Tash. Thank you for joining us. And I think what would be best if we open with Karakia, which, will you open with Karakia for us, or do you want me to open with Karakia? I can open with Karakia. Okay. Father God, thank you for bringing us together here today. Thank you that we can ask you to look after us. There's a lot of stuff coming our way. We ask that you keep your protective hand over us, the rest of Aotearoa, and we also ask that you are with those that need your care even more. Amen. Okay, what we are going to do is a quick introduction. I'm Riet. I am the chair of our Civil Defence Committee, Governance Group.
Ben Green, I'm the Group Manager for Title 50 Sweden.
Morena, Ian Wilson, I'm a Regional Advisor for the National Emergency Management Agency.
Rob Telfer, Councillor.
Kia ora, Tash Wano, Emergency Management and Recovery Lead for Te Runganui o Ngāti.
Morena tātou, no mai Whitewood, Recovery Manager and Group Recovery Manager for Brisbane District Council.
Kia ora, Murray Cave, I'm a Principal Scientist here at Council.
Yes.
Apologies.
Oh, just your name and what you do.
To Mary Community Lifelines.
Jocelyn Allen, Features. Morena, Tere Moana Kennedy, Senior Governance Advisor. Jill Simpson, Governance Advisor for Council.
Morena Prata, Māori Ward
Lena, Jeremy, you are First Term Councillor.
Morena Tash, and my home, Mikey Wanganui, Kia Tātai, Nadine Thatcher-Swan, Chief Executive.
Awesome. Yes.
Morena.
Who do we have on? We've got Anne and Carla online. Anne, you go first.
Morena, Anne Huriwai, Māori Ward Councillor, first time Councillor. And my apologies in advance, I can only stay till 10:30 as I'm attending the Nehu of Papa Nehu Jews at 11 a.m.
Thank you. We'll be finished by then, but thank you for putting in that apology. How?
Morena whānau, Carl Scragg from Title 50 Emergency Management.
Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, like I said earlier, we have a very light agenda for today. Even though we might have a lot of work this week coming our way, let's deal with what is on our table and what is ahead of us. Any questions, Tash, you just shout out and you'll see the flow. It is a relatively informal committee and you'll see how we roll, but any issues or questions, just shout out, please. Okay, I do have apologies for Councillor Tibble and Councillor Ria. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Muir, seconded by Councillor Parata. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Any declarations of interest? No? All good? And then I'm going to take you to our minutes on page 3. So if you just click to page 3, you would see these are the previous minutes, and they were emailed out by Dee quite some time ago. So if someone can move this as a true record. Thank you, Councillor Parata. Seconded, Councillor Muir. All in favour? You need to vote. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. Okay, let's get cracking into our work. We've got no action. No, the government plan is just there to note. We've got no leave of absence. Any acknowledgements and tributes that I need to be aware of? If not, yep, you.
Through the chair, and we'll be fitting for a follow-on meeting, but Dallas Teho finishes with the team in 2 weeks. So her service, particularly in what she's actually built, is what I would say is that there's a nationally leading welfare function. Certainly deserving of equally, I guess, the sacrifice of what it takes to do this job. Easy by any way, stretch of imagination, but she's definitely good. So I'd like to acknowledge her and then the service she's given for her region.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Dallas. If you were watching, we really appreciate it. And personally, I appreciate it. You've looked after me quite a few times. Having to get myself ready for TV or something, and there's no mirror or hairdryer at the Civil Defence, and Dallas was the one that helped me out, got me sorted. So thank you for that, Dallas. And then I also want to acknowledge, Nadine just let me know that Dave Hatfield is leaving the organisation, and we do want to acknowledge years of service and work. Dave, if you're watching this, or if not, if someone's watching this, please let Dave know. Thank you very much for the respectful and proactive way you've engaged, not only with councillors, but also with the public. We will definitely miss you. So thank you for that. Okay, no public input and petitions, no extraordinary business, no notices of motion, no adjourned business. I'll take you to our first report on page 13, and I will hand over to Ben and then to Ian.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you, Worship. I'll take the report as read. I'll just talk to the salient points within there. A few work streams, particularly significance for regional focus, particularly is with the, we've got obviously the legislation review that's been underway, the oral and written submissions are being collected for that, the outcomes of that and the preliminary guidance in terms of what then will be fed back is very much underway, and Ian can talk to a bit more around how those come through. If you've seen or been following anything with the, certainly with the flavour of the bill, probably reflects aspects that should be in place. There's probably aspects that are aspirational, and in between there's some certainly a focus in terms of enhancement to the system. The what's running in parallel with that from a regional lens is our setting group plan, which has been underway and it was initiated last year with the workshop. The consultation with the vet, Kinsella is the consultant leading the development of that plan, and that'll be populated certainly into this forum as much as it goes through into public consultation, and a time and date for that timeline will be set. I'd also equally just like to acknowledge Owen Lloyd, who was quite a key component of his contribution, and sadly his loss is reflective of cost, not just us as a group, but certainly the region, and just took all his immense wisdom and leadership that he was actually very much part of that bill on behalf of his iwi and hapu, as well as the Turanga Health. The bill, particularly the group plan, really is our regional run sheet and how we do things. So it's probably more relevant in terms of looking at the operational context of it. It is in draft form for consultation, so that time frame, and really that'll be presented back at a date to be set for that. So that's something certainly does require this table in particular to be across the collective ownership of it to then put it in place there. The benefit of having it run within the current settings for the legislation that will be adapting to some change, we can probably configure it within the context of the plan. It is taken into account with what NEMA, I guess, is the steward of the system really in terms of how they will take into account. Group plans have been completed already across the other 16 regional groups, but equally in terms of what we need to merge as part of the outcomes of the legislation. So Ian can talk to that. Just in terms of some of the operational things, we just included putting in the deployment of emergency resources into Rongopai and Rai. Just after New Year's, we'd initiated that with them before Christmas, and yesterday, which has taken probably a few months to get in place, but that same level of resourcing, and I'm going to talk about resource, it's a shipping container with hybrid energy systems, a desalination unit, shelter, bits and pieces. It's roughly around about $90,000 per resource set, and we've just delivered that, which Carl put into Muriwai yesterday with that community group, working with Beth and Tamanahuri and the local community for that. So,
how many of those do we have now? 19?
Significantly more than that. We've probably got about 30 sites across the region, and I think in terms of approximately $2 million worth of investment over the last 3 or 4 years to do that is all configured on our catastrophic risk planning for the Hikarangi magnitude 9. Anything less than that is an emergency, to be honest, is a good day, but it's not our worst day, and that's really what we've been for. We've got, and having just been raised at KEG, but a New Zealand security brief will run as part of the upcoming KEG on the 27th of May. That'll see a brief for KEG, which really is just a high level with SIS will run for that. Then really the intention is to run a workshop in the afternoon, and that certainly will expand to include Iwi.
Can you just for Tasha's help understand who sits on the KEG? Just that, because we talk about KEG, there are lots of acronyms, just who is involved and who makes up the KEG.
Yeah, it's you know, you've got an understanding of KEG?
Yes, yeah.
So, particularly with the chief executives, the police, fire, health, really pretty much the key operational level. If you look at this group sets the strategic direction, KEG really takes the operational direction with accountability back into KEG. So how we execute in the group plan is where we sort of have the KPIs or guest report lines back into this group. So SIS, in terms of really, you know, you look at misinformation, disinformation within the modern context of everything that comes into the security space, bringing that into region means we can have a focus on it. The afternoon workshop session being open, we'll be looking at bringing in particularly anyone who's really got large IT systems that could be vulnerable, or at least having a risk setting in terms of IT. And SIS working with them to develop that workshop. Key bit of work we've got on the way, just to speak to briefly on page 16, is the tsunami coastal mapping. So if you have ever looked at the maps, you'll note that there are blocks of those areas of inundation that are incomplete. That largely, in working with Murray Cave and Jose from Orca Consulting, represented the fact we didn't have enough LiDAR data to then complete the mapping. We do have that now. So working with Cave and Jose, that's been initiated, and I've really got that under action to complete that. Part of the water, particularly with our tsunami focus, also links into our key regional campaign, which aligns to a national campaign as well, as the Shakeout 2026. And for us, that really is a funded campaign. It's deliberate in terms of the way we do the engagement. But the key focus, if you look at the sign-up, particularly with 32% of a regional population base, an exceptional result for last year. It's more about really the context of why we do it. And these maps, in terms of taking that as public-facing campaigns, we'll be looking to really get people connected to that as we head into the August-September period for that engagement. Any questions on that? The maps, just one other thing which I did put the director's guidelines in for, we've seen in terms of the public-facing maps, there'll be monochrome in colour. The director's guidelines, I think people struggle to differentiate the orange, red and yellow zones. So in terms of what the director's guideline puts in place as a standard colour, we'll still use the colours because the relevance for us is really the source of tsunami, which determines impact or risk zone relevant to that. So it's Chile, obviously within the orange, yellow within the magnitude 9, which is our worst day, which is in the Hikarangi margin shore here. You just see really, it's certainly busy, and we're very much back into busy for this week as well. We've actually had probably be our 5th activation for weather, taking account even last week. So we're seeing very much a tempo with the way these systems weather systems that is, come into region. You very much see the wraparound. It's almost a run sheet for Western Bay of Plenty. The wrap around the top, particularly around the Waikato, Wharekaheke, Aotearoa area. That will be a significant focus for the weather event we're planning for, and initiated the regional plan for, which commenced yesterday. With Cyclone Vaianu, really it is around as much as we do, is around we started very much our preemptive planning, and I'll reflect the effort of particularly our communities that do stand up for this. Tash has sort of been there in the very much in the ground zero for the last event, but across our whole region, particularly with the focus of this next one, is around the whole region. So that's put in scope, that's 42 communities now that really need to be on the same level of at least awareness. And we do initiate them. We will be connecting directly with them this afternoon across really in terms of what we know, to be responsive with that and then look at the preemptive aspects of planning for worst case. It certainly highlights, I think, the Punaruku slip and Waiwaka Gorge. Given the fragility of both of those sites, will be scope within planning probably to at least maybe see them impacted up to including losing them for periods of time. That's an assumption, but I think it's a reasonable assumption based on what we've dealt with the last events.
Sorry, could you say that last sentence again? I didn't quite hear it.
I said that's an assumption on my behalf, but I think it's a reasonable assumption just based on the risk to both the Punaruku and the Waiwaka Gorge, just in terms of landslides and slips.
That's what we think is there's the risky points.
Yeah, I think, we tend to plan for the worst case, which means that we're configured at least for it. It's something we're not going to stop, but we need to take into account any access issues or where we do need to move things prior. Certainly, and I'll focus on the last event, which we've just concluded the survey for the debrief, and we're doing 2 debriefs. One will be, and I'm just pointing at Tash because it will be with Tash up in the 2 main civil defence areas up in the top of the coast, is to do an on-site debrief with that group, so we're setting a date for that. What we're collating in terms of the regional response here, which is being presented by way back of a report as well. So that's underway. I've got Ian from NEMA really is the developing, summarising the key points there, which will then bring those learnings back in. I think particularly there are aspects I would say at least we do very well. We're in the pursuit of looking for what doesn't work. And I'd probably even remove any aspect to gold standard. That's not the language we use. There's very much around iterative enhancement and development of the system we need to continually work at, because that's the nature of what we've been dealing with for the last 6 years. We need to be adaptive and agile to what is unfortunately becoming far too familiar in terms of what we're dealing with here. So although the tropical low 40U, the storm with no name, was probably very small in impact, it was actually quite significant in terms of complexity. The impact certainly for a number of whānau that were directly impacted there, but I always say it's like playing a test match game of cricket on a driveway. It's so small an impact, but everything you can take in terms of really what presents for how difficult it was to actually deal with that event was played out on there. So the learnings from it particularly is what probably will feed into what we're about to roll out with the current planning for this event. So the detailed in terms of debrief, I'm not going to pick that apart because we're not at the point where we've got the report to bring back in there, but any questions with events or...
Yes, Councillor Paras.
I was just wondering about, you didn't talk about it, but the $800,000 for emergency management resilience projects. Did you see that in that paper? Let me see what page that was. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, you're talking about the NEMA?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. How many of those dollars are our dollars and for what?
None.
None of them are our dollars.
No projects were put forward from Tairāwhiti for that money. That's a yearly money that sits under resilience. You can put projects to it based on the guidelines that are out there. And this year it was looking at obviously the National Disaster Resilience Strategy. If you had a project, you can develop that. You can put it in. It goes up against all other projects from New Zealand, and aside from that, but Tairāwhiti put none in this year.
That's because we're so ahead of the game.
We have, spoke to the resourcing for sites, so, with over $2 million worth of kit that we're still very much in the tail end of the point. But the strategic linkage with other groups that are doing bits of work that are relevant to us is the cross-leveraging of research and systems development. So $800,000 in the scheme of national fund is never going to be enough. It's so contested. We had to put something exceptional through to really being one. And we've had that, and I'll get Dr. Kagan to speak to where we have had fun. So there's nothing that's triggered us at this point. It's really
Our Materials most recent funding applications covered active fault mapping within the region. We would look to do that again because since we did that work, we have acquired new regional LiDAR, which is twice the resolution of what we had before. So that's something we can fine tune. And the previous one before that was in actual fact the initial tsunami mapping, which we're wrapping up now. Just like to also mention there is also the Natural Hazards Commission Resilience Fund. We're not eligible to apply for that. That goes to research agencies, so universities and the PROs. But there are two applications going in from Auckland University relating to the Te Rāwhiti region, which we are supporting. One is around utilising INSAR for landslide susceptibility, and the other one is looking at infrastructure risks on our local road network through the School of Engineering at Auckland University.
Awesome. Can I have a supplementary?
Yes.
All of those things I think are really important in terms of what we understand about our natural environment and civil defence and emergency management. If people are going to be researching about our region, and we are endorsing their research, is there any way we can push them into letting some of our own participate in that research so that we can build the capacity for academia and research locally? Can we do that? Can we say, we'll endorse it, but you take these three also?
You raise a good point, Councillor. And I don't think the science is fully integrated within the context of regional planning. Now, Tash comes out of that background, but really, if we're harmonising the fact that someone's got a very particular focus and expertise to bring in, to develop that in a region, the outtake is very relevant to us because I'll operationalise the aspect of what academia will produce then. If we're not doing that, we were researching something to determine really causation, the so what. I'm more focused on the and then what, which is around, we're taking really what a certainly detailed bit of work will produce for us, put it into context, the relevance in terms of where we can inject that, and then actually embed that within the operational work streams we have around public-facing communications or operational enhancement. So it is very relevant. I think we're particularly Massey, now that Tash is back here, is one conduit, but equally via NEMA as well, is that if we're doing research or science in the region, it should have strata across all of our layers that we've got oversight. It may be relevant, it may not be, but it's certainly flagging something that we know is underway. And the outtakes from that need to be really validated by the way we can use that. And not a bit of research will do that for us, but if we're not doing that, then we're really not synergy around a very common problem that perhaps we're all looking at.
I have another, unless other people have questions.
Good to go.
I was looking at the information and the mapping around the tsunamis. I know that's something we've talked about at length and have planned for in the region. Lots of that has been focused on the city centre, which I understand why, because that's where all the critical infrastructure are and that's where the population is. So I understand why we do that. Seeing Waipiro Bay and that Waikawa side, do we have reports and or an understanding of how a large-scale tsunami might affect our rural populations?
That's why if I brought up the layers in terms of how and where all of the tsunami resources are. Now, they are tsunami resources, so the shipping container, the way speak resources. So I'll go back to post the Kermadec earthquakes, which is really where this whole bit of work started. Because you're never going to not waste the opportunity for an event where people have got to focus on something. And going back to that point, probably not long into the role then. That project was a result of at least 44 hui that we ran across the whole region, with not the focus on Gisborne. In fact, but if you look at Gisborne in the quantum of the problem, 73% of and 22,500 people will be displaced by the quantum of that event. So that then puts in place the logic for what we know will be very difficult to support and get to, which will be our rural and remote communities coastal. That's why there's probably been an I won't say overspec, but we've resourced on the basis that we know that we're going to give them at least a head start. If you look at the locations for all of those containers, or even Tolaga, it's nowhere near the school or the marae or the township. It's on the extent of the tsunami zone well to the south, in the vicinity of Greg Sheldon's woolshed. Because it's not about they need to get to container to survive. The first action for a community is to evacuate to survive. And your second action is that you'll know where to get to. And it may not be easy to get to. Tauraro, another example, that container doesn't sit in Tauraro, it sits at Aotearoa Marae. And that was a collective decision by the community in terms of that. So the relevance, why we've really pushed into the Shakeout campaign, and we've led it for the last 5 years, is because it's a number one start state for planning for us. And that's the whole region in scope. So the concluding and filling in the gaps, there's not a lot of people there, but people still live there. And that's really the layer, that level that we would try and take that down to.
Is there the same investment, because I have participated in seen the investment in the Ngāti Pro communities, which has been a huge relief. Has that same level of investment gone towards Muriwai? That way? Have they got
That's what I just mentioned, that was physically delivered yesterday.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay, goodbye.
And equally, we took into account as part of the broader, this is going back when Sir Selwyn was part of the Toitu Collective then, with the chairs, and actually went to them for the endorsement to lead the development of the project with their blessing, pretty much. So it also took into account critical flood risk, and Te Karakia, for example, clearly not in the tsunami zone, but very much in a flood zone, and on their site, which, they really handed over those assets, they take ownership of them.
You visited it 2 days ago.
They have that there, much as we've resourced all the inland rural areas as well, because we need equity based on a risk and hazard. If we're not doing that, then it's a coastal focus only, and that isn't going to serve us for what we need.
It's deeply impressive that at this table we so often talk about equity. I don't know if that happens in other places, but this region always talks about equity and tries to prove it. So I thank you for the work that you do in your team.
Councillor Mio.
Just on the evacuation and resilience settings for our worst day, is there a plan to seek funding for widening the Stanley Road Bridge?
Not for an infrastructure layer. To be honest, it's probably beyond the scope of what I'd be able to. I would be, in terms of a hazard, probably defining the why is probably where we'd have. And we did that with the footbridges. For the IELTS submission, they asked in terms of the AI modelling that really shows really how a population reacts on the basis of a tsunami evacuation. There's critical choke points. All of our bridges and the footbridges in particular are quite critical. So and it's good to see that they did get that across the line. But really what we provide, we're probably more of an enabler to really help define a wider sort of description of the problem. With them improving the resilience of those footbridges, gives us some degree of surety that we can factor them in to be very much what it takes to evacuate the city, because we don't have, it's quite a stark, confronting challenge to try and evacuate the yellow zone, which is pretty much the 22,500 people out of the city. In fact, a lot of people will not make it out of it. That's reality. I can't sugarcoat the fact that everyone gets out, because I know that there is a probability a lot won't. But I will touch on, we have, and just in terms of resourcing as well, and it is with an equity lens, is that the city, we've set up and resourced 5 extra urban sites. So Ilminster School, Central School, Maungapapa Lytton High School, and House of Breakthrough and Poho have already been the two that we had. So we've now got resources into those sites, and appreciate Jeremy across with the neighbourhood support group. We're looking to really have that group as the enabler for the activation. So that's very much on the cusp of really establishing, forming, and then really looking at what it takes to train and activate those sites. So it all sort of does come together, but it's not all reliant on the school because it's out of school. We know that that doesn't work because you need a pretty good wraparound into those sites. I appreciate the principals and the board of trustees that have bought into that and have actively got those resources on site.
I have a question about preparedness and our senior citizens. Like the Rymans and Ethan, they would have, a plan what they would do with their high need residents. I'm more thinking, and you and I have spoken about it, like remember the what's it called? Palm Gardens, just here next to the river in Aberdeen Road, which might have, say, 50 units. Do you proactively work with organisations like that, or do you wait for them to reach? Do you check that facilities like that have appropriate plans, or do you, at this stage, wait for them to reach out and possibly help them?
Yeah, and that's a theme of the new bill, is that minority or disadvantaged communities are very much in scope. And I mean, Kyle has met with 2 age groups in the last fortnight. So there's a proactive outreach that you get collectives that are very much seeking to get some insight to. Connect with aged care, particularly in the fuel crisis, and we've been scoping around who's really got what in terms of then trying to quantify what a emergency fuel plan looks like. Has actually seen us engage with all of those sites as well. But personally, I've been to at least 2 of those homes as well. Probably for the level of what we would assume to be the level of preparedness. There might be old people, but they're not sitting around. They've actually got probably a lot more underway than what has surprised us.
What surprised me is that the residents are the ones prodding management to, they are well aware of, they watch the news, their kids or their grandkids might be talking about evacuation plan for their school and be like, hey, Papa, do you have an evacuation plan? And that's the message, is that the residents are quite, they want to know there's something proper in place and they're quite willing to help.
Yeah. And if you put a rural lens on it, where you've got Karakia living in rural communities, they're probably more the challenge. Old people that are living that aren't easily supported off grid.
Yeah.
And that's part of what a community wraps around them. We know that the vulnerable that need at least a door knock and probably someone dropping in. That's very much how our system activates for them.
Councillor Parata.
Just because you mentioned it, the fuel crisis, does that sit, obviously there's a plan, a mitigation plan for the Gisborne District Council, but when it comes to activation, does that then sit as emergency management, and therefore does that become a CEDM structure where we require a controller when it becomes critical?
I'll get into just to talk through. So, and the reason I'd point in is that NEMA is the initiator with working alongside MB, is really where the system activates. So it's
MB is in charge until NEMA becomes in charge.
MB is the leader for the fuel at the moment, and there are 4 phases basically set in our national plan. We have staff actually at the moment ensconced within MB, helping the planning and the operational componentry. At phase 3, that's the emergency stage, yes, we take over in respect of the critical supply for the fuel for the resources to deal with that response. Other than that, though, we take our lead from MB and we support them.
Just for the sake of, I suppose, the minutes and our winners, I'm deeply concerned about whānau in our community who have disabilities. I worry about whether or not there's enough visibility over them in terms of when we start thinking about crisis and emergency management. I'm always thinking about who's got eyes over our disability sector. This is preaching to the converted, but our RSC migrant whānau, those 2 particular cohorts of people I get really concerned of that when we start thinking about, we've got, you know, Tashi advocating for iwi, and we've got, you know, farmers, and everyone else is getting considered, families. It always feels like those two in particular get very easy for them to not be considered, same as, I suppose, the elderly. So I just wanted that noted for us to be cognizant of. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
If I could just actually answer that too. We very much have those groups in scope. So Whaikaha is the sort of disability sector, plugged in within the welfare coordination group in terms of representation and support. And equally for the Multicultural Council, are very much a key player. So we have, if anything, probably success similar to rural plug-in for how and really what the system's evolved from and where we are now. They're very much present because they weren't, if I go back to Gabrielle and be honest, we're in the RSC component. The multicultural bit, the uplift from there, have had every Pacific Island community as a collective come through the centre in terms of undertaking also needs assessment training.
Beyond that though, the RSC workers are here on a contract, right, from the horticulture industry. Are they participating in those conversations and know that there's a responsibility on them to support their employees that they've brought over from other countries?
Not to that level because they're quite transient for a short period of time,
Yeah,
but
okay.
where they do tend to sort of gravitate to is that the local communities for wherever their Pacific ethnic is, they very much plug in with that. So that's our conduit to really have the wrap around and actually getting when we need to sort of get outreach in place.
There is a responsibility that sits with the contractor that brings them into the country as well.
Yeah.
In respect to that though, that is actually covered in the new emergency management bill, disproportionately affected people and vulnerable. That, if it's enacted, will come in the bill. It does have a moratorium of 12 months to be enacted and dealt with while we put in place guidance to help you with it. But that is in the new bill.
I'm happy to move the paper.
Awesome. Yeah, now you're going to quickly talk to us before we move on to our recovery. Will you just give us a NEMA update?
I'll take the report as read. Just to back up on the bill at the moment is with the select committee. They're hoping to return it to government on the 9th of June and then be passed through while government is sitting. Once it's enacted by the Governor-General, it will come into play. As I said, there are sections of the bill that do have a lag time to be brought into play, and that's one under the disproportionately affected people. The other componentry is the appointment and selection and criteria for controllers, and also community plans. It was another area that is allowed in respect of a lag time so we can provide advice. That said, you're actually quite well over already in this aspect of the group here, so it's there. Another clause within the new bill is grandfathering your group plan that's now being passed. Anything that comes in the plan that is requiring amendment is not required to be enacted until your new plan is written. So you've got the lag in the 5 years. So you're not wasting your time doing your plan now. I won't cover the full because we've done that. Yesterday, new amendments to the tsunami activation procedures came in for New Zealand. We originally had a template for a marine warning and coastal inundation. We've now separated those out, and you will get, if it's a local or a regional tsunami warning, you will get evacuate immediately. If it's a distant tsunami, you will get prepare to evacuate, and then it comes back to the group to sort the line after there. So our first one, because it's less than 3 hours travel to New Zealand, we will advise people to evacuate immediately from the tsunami zones that your local plan is actually identified as in the risk area. The guide to the plan, which basically puts operational requirements around the Act. We're reviewing that this year. We'll start in June, and that will go through to November, and then come back to again in next year. Groups will be heavily involved in that. Agencies we work with, because that actually carries out their responsibilities, what they're required to do, and under a declaration what they're required to prepare for and how they're required to act. It basically has it also has section 33 where we look at the funding and how we will support you, and we will basically come back to you and seek your advice on that. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. thank you for your first work. Thank you for the great work being done. I also want to acknowledge, you will need to tell us now what prize, there was an award recently. You need to talk about it because I don't know the details as much.
It's to be bestowed, but
To be bestowed on you, but lay it out so that we know, so we can get our taxes ready for the event.
To be honest, I don't even know what it is, but it's the Australasian Institute of Emergency Practitioners.
Surely as committee members we get a
Very flash. It is very flash and only bestowed on a few in this big Australasian area. So from all of us.
Yeah, nominated through RANS, which is the Messi, which, to be honest, had no idea, other than David Parsons. So no, well done on a national award for this. I go, well, I actually don't know what that's for, but
excellence.
Excellence. It is not for mediocre or B+ work. It is for A++ work. So on behalf of us, congratulations, Ben, and thank you for the wonderful work you do. It's not only recognised here, it's recognised nationwide and now Australasian-wide, and next they'll be awarded the World Award. Okay, I will second your paper. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Ben, thank you, Ian. Okay, no mai. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I
Do
just...
you want to have a quick break?
Are you not here for the same?
No. Carry on. Go for gold.
Morena tātou.
Morena.
So you have a recovery report in your papers. Timing is key here, so there's been a lot happened since the papers were submitted and written, but not to distill the importance and urgency of the current event, but also I do just want to quickly just run through, we're calling it Recovery BAU, unfortunately, so the current recovery program of work that's occurring. So in your papers I talk mostly to civil defence related issues, but just a little bit of an update in terms of woody debris, because I'm sure there's many questions there. But so the woody debris program, which was initially funded by DIA, the DIA funding is now complete. So there's been 30 months of work in this program and just under $50 million of an investment into improving resilience across 5 of the 7 catchments. The MPI now funds the ongoing work, and our focus of this program is around various forms of relevant treatment in the high priority catchments. The January event reduced the need for region-wide recovery work in rivers, but the current active projects we've got are in the Waipawa catchment. We've also got work happening, and you should have received some advice as councillors in terms of the work in the lower Waimata. There's also work happening in terms of working with forestry, with the industry, around treating sources of high-risk areas behind forest gates. And there's currently 2 active projects in play with the team, with council and with industry, project work. The team's also working and supporting the Dean and the directors in the implementation of the transition business case, and so they're putting quite a bit of work into that as well. I'll take you back to the report. So in terms of recovery across FOSL, we received confirmation of additional funding for the Category 2P program, which is the mitigation program for homes that have a tolerable risk. So that's where they either are lift or have some sort of mitigation on their property. We've got until June 2026 to complete the distribution of that fund.
Can I quickly ask about that, just to clarify for myself? Initially, we had the funding to lift. Then we identified there were 29 houses that might not be a lifting, but it might be a retaining wall. Is that the extra funding we then asked for those properties, or were there additional lifts as well?
So you're correct. It was initially to lift homes.
Yep.
But over 2024 and 25, the region plus the Crown recognised it was more than just lifting homes, but bringing in other mitigation options. And so that was incorporated into the current funding package. That allowance was brought into the policy. The additional funding has just been in recognition that so each applicant can apply for up to $95,000. So there's been emerging issues, costs that have come through as homeowners investigate the options for them. And the Crown had recognised the ability to be able to provide a bit more funding on top of what we've already received. Cap 3 voluntary policy, so the voluntary buyout policy that closed in January. So 58 of 59 homes are all completed, all the buyouts are completed, settlements finished. One of those properties opted not to be part of the policy. We've spent quite a bit of time in terms of the river resilience work, completing modelling and assessments across all the catchments, but there has been a lot of energy put into the Te Karaka project. I'm pleased to say that we've made some really solid progress, thanks to Tim and the leadership with the Rivers team, and other support that we've brought in terms of designs, modelling, and considering how we can fund the cost of that preferred model. So just to remind us that we received a budget of 13.2 million for Te Karaka, and the costs have come out just probably about twice that amount, but we've been able to discuss with the Crown the repurposing of current funding, that we've been able to find some savings within the program, and then there'll be some discussions that will be come to council with councillors around looking across the entire resilience program and some considerations that you might want to make there. The River Intelligence project that has completed, all the money was spent there, and the insights from that work now help to inform how we operate in civil defence and in other areas. The rating recovery program, we experienced some impacts in January, but nothing significant to have to repurpose or change any project scopes. And there's been quite a lot of work happened between NZTA and Gisborne District Council over the last month, assessing what the new demand will be across the Hikarangi region in particular. There were no impacts to the Bridges program in the January event, but we are now being very cautious about the oncoming weather systems. We're in pretty full construction mode in terms of our Bridges program, so the team are now doing some significant assessments around vulnerabilities that might be posed in terms of the system that's coming through. In terms of the, I call it TD5F, but the January event, we've been working in partnership, so working really hard to establish a iwi community-led recovery governance structure for the current event. So that, at a chief executive level, consists of Nadine as the chief executive for GDC, we have Hinare Walker for Ngāti Porou, and then we have Doug at Trust Tairāwhiti. At an operational level, it's those organisations as well as Beef and Lamb, the Tairāwhiti Whenua Collective, and then the government agencies that also support us. So we're all working very hard to coordinate our efforts based on what the community are asking for in terms of recovery support. Community leads, we have community leads that are dedicated, particularly in Te Aroa and Wharekahika, and they're doing an immense amount of work to strengthen the community approach in their respective communities, but also be the voice and the coordinator in terms of those areas.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we move on, are those community leads, is that a paid role? Is anybody funding them to do that job?
I'm not clear on whether they're being paid yet, Councillor, but that is something that, as a collective, that we've been working on.
Oh, it has been consistent.
You'll have the information there around the combined bid that was put into via NEMA to the Crown, and we have the areas of consideration that we've been focused on, and those areas have been pretty clear right from day 2, to be honest. And so there's been a number of bids put into the Crown to try and find additional funding to support the collective in a range of areas, particularly in the area that Councillor Parata has just raised. I was going to move off the report just to give you a high-level overview of the key priorities and objectives, but I might just invite any questions, particularly for the current recovery program, if anyone has any.
Any questions on what's in here? You can still ask if you remember it later, but I think let's move on to what you just said, an overview of priorities.
Just on the slips and dropouts, can I just have clarification that the bottom line there on work, it says that the current currently out for tender of 31 sites, but it says once these tenders are evaluated, procurement will pause and then recommence late July, August. What does that mean?
That will speak to probably what happens normally within the construction season around the oncoming winter season and the weather conditions that the industry operate within.
It just worries me a little bit with this, the slips and dropout side of it, is that we're now 3 years down the track, and we've got a limited season which didn't start. A lot of these didn't start till January, and then we sort of like got a very short window, and then we're moving on for next year. Next one is 4 years. It just seems a long time for that type of work, which is not major construction. That's all that worries me. Is that we seem to be operating in a very, very narrow window. Yeah.
So I can probably comment on that, Councillor Taufa. So, like the first 12 months, we actually, or probably less than 12 months, we didn't actually have funding confirmed. And so we haven't had that full run from the time the cyclone hit until now. So if you discount that period of time, plus the slips and dropouts that are in this bucket are these ones, they're not your run-of-the-mill ones that you can just get done over a period of time. It requires quite significant design, resource consenting steps that go in between it. What I do know is that the team had worked really hard to get all that design work done so that we can just hit the market, and what you'll start to see over this next construction period, given the fuel costs and stuff, is that we should be able to complete that work. So it feels like a long time, but in reality it was a period where we were doing a whole lot of negotiation around getting the funding and then doing the design work to get us to this point where we can go out to market.
In addition, Councillor, this report, the way it's been posted for you is a bit misleading. Prior to this, all of the non-complex slips and dropouts work occurred prior to December 2025. So there's been quite a significant program underway. What you've been given visibility here of now is what Nadine referred to as the complex program of work, which has taken time in terms of design and lining it up with the construction season that's underway. I can give you some of that wider detail if you would like to see.
Yeah, it's just these are the questions we get asked as councillors from the community, and you don't have answers, so it's sort of just, yeah.
We're happy to provide that for you.
Yeah, where are we at? Go to the bathroom for 1 minute and then you're still answering, you're still asking. Rob, you've got another question? All good? Any other questions? No? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, yes, I did have one.
Yeah.
It's amazing to hear that that the virtual part is starting to wrap up and that policy is complete, because it feels like it was a long, challenging experience. But I I remember when we originally had those conversations around postal that we were setting a precedent, and now that we've had that, what are we calling this storm? That storm?
5F.
5F. So we had 5F and so many homes that were damaged, so many without insurance, and then we know that insurance itself takes 1 million and 10 years of trying not to pay out. That's the experience. Now that we've set that precedence with postal, is there an expectation that there's more funds coming?
Well, can I comment on that though? So we didn't set the precedent with postal. We were really clear that this was not our policy. This was the government's policy. And so the government had to make the determination on whether or not it was going to do a similar buyout process, which they were really clear right at the beginning of this event that they were not going to be entertaining any more of that. So that's kind of where we were. We made sure to, right from the beginning, even including in our own implementation policy, that we were clear that this is not council's.
Right. So thank you for that clarification, but it's been done before, and kind of where does that leave? Where does it leave all the families that have homes that they can't fix? Do we know, or does that truly sit outside of our scope of works?
There's certainly no indication whatsoever from the government that they will enter into a similar agreement. And that is, at this stage, across the board for all issues. We still need to do some collective work in terms of truly understanding the position for each affected, displaced home owner or land owner. So we still need to understand that work. And whilst we would not say that that is a GDC responsibility, it is a collective responsibility for us to help understand and help these families plan for some solutions for them moving forward. But there is no solid option of a solution package for them at this stage.
Supplementary. So appreciate that work that's happening, and appreciate that it sits in the grey spot of not really anybody's lane. Knowing now how many events Tairāwhiti have experienced, notwithstanding that there's one coming on Saturday, Sunday, probably more over the next few years, do we understand what impact the cost of insurance is having on our whānau? Because already we're underinsured as a region. Is it now harder to be insured? And is there anything that can be done at either a regional or national perspective that can add pressure to the way in which they engage with our region? Or does that sit also outside of our lane?
No, I wouldn't say that's outside of our lane, but it's a very, very big question that probably needs a lot more corridor and conversation with a range of parties. So we have been working closely with the Insurance Council New Zealand to try and understand from their perspective the data that they have. The data that they have is not aggregated down to community level, it's more at a regional level, but they are certainly wanting to help regions understand the complexity that they're going to be faced with these ongoing events. But that is still work that we have to do. I recall post Cyclone Gabrielle, we had that economist come into Gisborne to talk to us about insurance retreat in terms of the impacts from Cyclone Gabrielle only. Yeah, so that needs to be a strategic piece of work that we do as regional leaders to understand what that means for us over the next 10, 20, 50 years.
Can I just be clear, insurance retreat means they get back, eh?
What's happened in Westport?
It's deeply concerning.
I think it's more I think it points to what is the inadequacy of our recovery system in New Zealand, and so we, as part of the council's submission to on the emergency management bill, talked about kind of some of those system improvements that can happen around recovery to have some more nationwide consistency. So after each event, We're not going cap in hand and saying, can we have X million dollars, we've got this amount of damage, and then we're having to then contend with other regions when there's another event that comes along. And so we need a better way to fairly allocate support to regions and for those people that don't have insurance.
And just going back to the original tenor of the question around the previous event, Natural Hazards Commission do collect data on each of the insured properties, and they have undertaken to share at a very anonymised level the locations of properties that were insured, so we can identify ones which will be looked after by the insurance companies and Natural Hazards Commission, so that we then identify the ones that the outliers which are not insured. So we will have that level of understanding hopefully fairly shortly. They've promised that data getting to us this month, and so that is spatial data, so we can actually then go and overlay it with our knowledge of the damage to buildings that occurred during that event and get a better understanding of the ones which will be vulnerable from a funding point of view.
And also this discussion is happening at a national level as well with local government in New Zealand and Chris Farfo in the Insurance Council, and we are having those discussions with ministers because what we've seen in the West Coast is that insurance companies have started saying we will not insure that neighbourhood or that township, and it is massive distress for people that do live there currently, but yeah, we'll see you later. So that is happening nationally as well, because it is a huge concern across the country, especially for us, because like you said, there's probably something coming our way in the next week and in the next few years, and we've seen so many things. So that's an ongoing discussion to be had, but it is a strategic discussion to be had, because it will come from the top and from the Insurance Council and possibly direction.
I suppose just to add to, just to paint a bit more of a picture of what it looks like from the emerging trends in the community in regards to inability to access insurance. In Tairāwhiti, we seem to have quite a complex issue where we're actually, specifically speaking to the East Coast, it's largely whenua Māori arrangements and papakainga that presents a layer that kind of makes things difficult to access capital or even to access insurance packages, because often at times a lot of the housing arrangements on those properties or shared agreements, they're not consented. So when they're going through the insurance process, they're being asked questions like, is this a consented property, which leads them to kind of back off or retreat from pursuing that process. That's also another issue with the homes that have recently been allocated in the region that haven't gone through the council planning process. Those are existing arrangements that they're going through with the providers, which I don't have too much detail on. But also costs seem to be a major factor as well. So we've seen that a lot of whānau had contents insurance but not property insurance, which then meant that they were unable to access any of the NHC funding which was available for property cleanups.
There's often policies that we have as well, like the mayoral fund or council policies also, there is some sub-clauses in there as well that it need to be a consented building or a legal dwelling, so that also sometimes, like you say, and that make people not come forward because, it is complex. It is but ongoing national and local discussions, definitely.
I'm happy to move the paper.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Muir. No more questions? All good? All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. I will close this meeting. Thank you, Moana.